Welcome to Truman's Town Hall with your host, Matt Truman.
Hello, I am Matt Truman. Thank you for downloading this podcast. Thank you for sharing with a friend. The last podcast was shared over on Truman's Town Hall podcast on Facebook. That post alone reached 3,000 people. So thank you for sharing the podcast. Please continue to do so. Hopefully we can get the information out and inspire others to get involved in city government. Were you able to watch Tuesday's meeting? Were you able to attend Tuesday's work session, April 2nd? The item that I was very interested in watching was the closure of the Needmore Water Plant. Looks like they may be closing that plant and connecting to Dayton's water. One of the interesting things that came out of that is they said that they cannot mix, once the water is softened, they can't mix softened water with hard water, so it's not going to work out. Yet, when they connect to Dayton, will that water mix well? That would be a question some of you may have as well. But the real discussion, the real interesting discussion came during the Lexington Place TIF District. In short, by the end of the meeting, there may come Monday be legislation for a non-school TIF and to withhold the current money being sent to the schools from the city. Now, if you've watched the city council meeting and you hear terminology spoken and you're a little unsure of what that means, I'm going to read a few of the definitions so we are all on the same page. One word comes up quite a bit: millage or mill. Different 2.25 mill levy or 0.25 mill levy. So millage is a rate as of taxation expressed in mills per dollar. Millage rate is the rate of which property taxes are levied on property. A mill is 1/1000th of a dollar. Property taxes are computed by multiplying the taxable value of the property by the number of mills levied. The millage rate can be found on the property tax statement or by contacting your city, township, county assessor's office. Another phrase of terminology that you may not be familiar with is debt service. Debt service is the cash that is required to cover the repayment of interest and principal on a debt for a particular period. Pilot payments. A school board has three options in response to a proposed TIF that requires consent. The board can 1. Approve the proposed TIF, 2. Reject the proposed TIF in whole or in part, or 3. Negotiate an agreement which will provide the compensation to the school district equal to a certain percentage of the amount of taxes exempted. These payments in lieu of taxes are commonly referred to as pilots. I took that from the Huber Heights City Schools. Pilots allow schools to immediately recover at least some of the lost funds, but schools are required to declare pilots as compensation, which will count toward the total funding that the school receives from the state. That's important to note. School funding generally shifts from the local level to reliance on the state, and school districts under TIFs often report inadequate returns from the state. Inadequate returns. School districts and local governments are often not defined by the same geographical boundaries, which means that schools often lose money to TIFs, even though school districts' residents have no voice in the local government proposing the TIF. So essentially, City Council could do a TIF, and I believe it's up to the ratio of 75-25. 75% of that money would go to the city, 25% would go to the schools. The schools need 100% of that money, roughly 100% of that money. So in the past, the schools denied this first ask. They said, no, we do not want a TIF district in the Lexington Place area. We need that money to operate for our students. One question never came up, and that was, what is this money being used for? At this time, I don't know where they allocate those funds that they receive from the city. It was discussed on Tuesday that a non-school TIF would only cover half of the proposed project. Half. In 2018, there was a total of TIF and pilot payments of $1,093,363.47, just to give you a general overview. So during Tuesday's meeting, there was discussion about withholding the money that was agreed to in 97. It was also explained that during this time, the city of Huber Heights acquired the water utility. In doing so, the company before was responsible for paying taxes that went to the schools. When the city acquired this water utility, they promised the schools that you will not miss out on that money. This is going to be a win-win for both of us. Sounded like a good deal. Now the city, over 20 years later, wants to provide an infrastructure project, which I'm all for an infrastructure project. But in doing so, they've been trying to meet with the city schools. Now, from what I gathered from the meeting and from what was said, is that the city schools are unwilling to meet. That's what was basically said throughout that meeting. Having looked into that, I can say to you that that is not necessarily the case. There have been attempts by the city and the school board to meet. Unfortunately, there were only, I believe it was only one day that the city council could meet, Wednesday, and the school board, I believe, was offering Saturdays. The city refused Saturday meetings. You can check that. The school board also offered, I believe, Tuesdays and Thursdays as well. So why haven't the two entities, the two governmental entities in the city, been able to come back to the table on this? The school has already refused this TIF district. They don't need to come back to the table for that at all. They're not going to accept this. This is not good for the schools. This is good for the city because the city's going to get more money to put toward their project. A question that I don't think was answered is there other avenues to find the financing to make this project work? It would be a good project, but you have to have the money to make it happen. So what I'm about to do now is play some highlights from this discussion so you can hear for yourself what was actually said by City Council on Tuesday, April 2nd.
What is the feeling of the council on scheduling the next joint meeting with the school board? Yes, Mr. Campbell?
I totally agree with your comments, and I think waiting would be the right option.
Any other questions? Any other comments about that? Yes, Mr. Morgan?
Thank you, Mayor. Just, Jerry, a question for you, if you don't mind, or Rob, whomever. Proceeding with a TIF without the school district, is that irreversible once it's completed? In other words, if we launched off in a TIF district without the schools, and then come summertime the schools come around, is there any reason we can't have our cake and eat it too here as far as proceeding? And I'm not suggesting, Mayor, that we necessarily do that next Monday night.
You're just saying change from a non-school TIF to a participating
like
TIF?
canceling the current TIF and then changing it to something else or whatever it would be.
I honestly don't know that answer right now.
Would you maybe gather that for us as well? And I would just say amend all the comments, including Mr. Campbell and Mr. Shaw's, Mayor, both on the urgency of the school's involvement, which seems to continue to be a problem. And I'd also note, Mayor, that I don't have any problem with your recommendation, but the superintendent's not who's making the decision. So the board maybe should pay a little bit of attention to the opportunity for collaboration here.
I don't disagree with that at all either.
Thank you.
Okay, that was Ward 3 council member Seth Morgan. There have been 2 collaborating meetings between City Council and the school board. Seth Morgan was absent at both of those meetings. That is a fact. He will be the hard charger, the one initiating defunding the school system, and angry that the 2 entities couldn't get together, yet he was not at the 2 meetings that they have had previous. I digress, or progress, if you will.
And I would just say amend all the comments, including Mr. Campbell and Mr. Shaw's, Mayor, both on the urgency of the school's involvement, which seems to continue to be a problem.
It continues to be a problem because he wasn't there for the other 2. However, we do have to point out the good point that he made about the school board will ultimately make the decision yay or nay. They're a firm nay, a no on this school TIF. Yes, they are. They have been. They've reported it, posted it on their website. Firm no on the TIF district. But he did point out a good point. The mayor says, let's kick the can to August when the new superintendent comes, because he's more apt to go along with this or help with it. But he has no say. He may have an influence, but he has no say. The school board is the body that will vote yes or no and say, we can agree to this. The city doesn't need that agreement, but they want that agreement because they would definitely be overreaching by going above the school district in providing this 75-25% TIF. Mr. Morgan went on to say,
I have no objection, but may I ask a question as well related to that? So this meeting wasn't specifically for the Lexington TIF. It was the same meeting that we've been trying to schedule now for 6 months.
Yes.
Right. I think we've also talked offline about inviting Bethel to have a similar conversation with us. Mm-hmm. Can we maybe? Yeah, I'm a little frustrated that we can't seem to get 2 bodies together. I'd half suggest, Mayor, that maybe we just pick one of their meeting days and we all show up together over there. It's really kind of ridiculous.
Yes, I think there's five members, well, both ways. So we have 9 of us and 5, so we're trying to coordinate the schedules of 14 different individuals through those dates with 2 different boards has been somewhat problematic.
But we all know the dates of their meetings, right? So we could all, as a council, just take it upon ourselves, and I think we could take Jerry and Rob with us and just hold a meeting over there. I'm not really joking, but anyway,
it's already a public meeting.
So what that tells me is it's all in the school board's lap. It's their fault. City of Heber Heights is saying it's your fault, school board, for not meeting with us. The school board could come back and say, hey, I've met with you twice, Mr. Morgan, and you weren't there either time. Where were you? What's the urgency for it now? We already told you guys no. What else do you want from us on this issue? If you want to collaborate on other things or talk about how to bolster the city together as one, that's great. But we need to do it as one. I don't know. That's just what my thoughts are. Okay, so after that discussion, Mr. Lyons brings up the funding to the city.
Yes, Mr. Lyons.
Mayor, thank you. My preferred method would be the same, wait for the next superintendent. But one question I did have, Rob, we have paid payments to the schools for the water plant.
Correct.
And we're not obligated to do that other than a previous council obligated council to pay for that. How much money a year are we sending to the schools on just that item alone? Do you know that off the top of your head?
I believe it's around a $400,000 number, but I'd have to confirm that. I know I passed that schedule out some time ago, but
and that has been a while.
Yeah, that number sticks out in my head for some
But
reason.
if we're